Hey, Jared. So,
It always feels like such an ordeal when I dial into the meeting. I feel like there's so much dialing and so many numbers. And as I get older, my capacity for remembering a sequence of numbers just gets shorter and shorter. So I keep having to look back at the number as I'm dialing my phone.
You are not that
But
old.
I got it. I'm here. I'm
So,
here though.
I dialed in on PMI too, and I thought I was in my personal. So, one of those days. So.
Not too old for a Zoom meeting, not just yet. How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm good.
Ready for Thursday?
Yeah, I am. I like these meetings now because it gives me an excuse to leave the client site a little early. Hey, I've got a webinar. I've got to get started. I'm not going to do it from here, So
right.
I'm going to go. Right. I'm going to have to get going. I'm just kidding. It's not really that bad, but.
No,
it does
I
give me
understand.
home
Sometimes you just
early.
need a change of scenery. So I'll actually be in Baton Rouge. I'm heading on the road to Baton Rouge in the morning, and so just kind of planning everything around Thursday. And another change is I'll wind up speaking. So I think AJ may talk some, but that might be flexible. So good times.
I have a bunch of meetings that I just realized today. I have a bunch of stuff scheduled for Thursday morning in Baton Rouge.
Okay.
I'll probably have to move, either move to the afternoon or move out to a different week.
Right.
Because that makes for a long day. I drive out and meetings all morning, and then kind of like desk time until the event in the afternoon. I'll move those things over a little bit.
I totally understand. So I'm seeing a few people joining us. So which of y'all, if y'all are coming and seeing us on Thursday for the anniversary party, let us know. I see some of y'all that I know signed up. I'm just not going to call y'all out specifically.
Did I sign up?
You did, yeah.
Okay. I have forgotten before and then just shown
It's okay.
up.
No, so I've taken the thing with like these meetings and the registration, sending them out, and I'm probably going to do the same thing with the anniversary meeting because the date for sign up kept moving. It's just projecting numbers in advance when you're organizing with food and things of that nature. Project management, it's more challenging than what we think it's going to be. So, but I'm going to send a reminder to everybody that signed up on it just to remind them of the day and such. So, and it's an important reminder to me too. So, same thing.
No, and I'm looking forward to it. It's that it wouldn't be the first time that I've just like shown up and not actually registered for the thing.
No. So how's everybody doing today as y'all are joining us? Oh, Amy, no. No. I just saw your message. You're bumming me out. I was hoping to get to see you.
Yeah, it's just like 3 conflicting things happening that night. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Are we already at that part of the year where everything conflicts with everything else? I thought we had a couple of months left. But then once you get to about that Thanksgiving time frame, like it's really hard to plan stuff because inevitably, it's like my work and then my wife's work and then like any friends that I have left, and everyone wants to do their Christmas parties like on the same weekend or whatever parties on the same weekend. It's just like, oh, now you got to make tough decisions.
Right. It makes it tough. So Well, let me email our speaker too, because I know he messaged us earlier and he was, I'm just going to make sure that he's got the link. Because I know, yes. Okay.
I'm sorry, Charles. We'd love to see you there. We'd love to see you there. I hardly ever recognize you without your corner office background. But I would love to see you there if you can make it there.
See if I can get my video working.
Oh,
yeah. At least the audio, man. Look, I drop a joke there. It's like crickets. It's like, wow, that's a tough room, you know.
Yeah, my conflict with the 50th is more personal. We're trying to do home repairs and contractors still from storms. If you can believe that, 2 years later, it's just crazy. Yeah.
I do believe it. I do believe it. Well, hey, best of luck with that. I know how it is with contractors. Like if I could find some good reliable contractors that show up on time out here, things would be different. But yeah.
Yeah, they're kicking me out of my house. I've got to pack up and leave so they can do major construction. So.
My goodness. Well, hey, maybe Baton Rouge is a great destination for you.
That's true. That's why it's 50-50 if I'll be able to make it or not.
Yeah,
did you ever live in Baton Rouge before? Because I used to always.
No,
I
didn't live in Baton Rouge, but I had some contracts for services, and I spent like 2 years one stretch living out of a hotel.
Okay. Even I see Aziz is on here too. I know Aziz, you're out in Lake Charles now too a lot, aren't you? So I'm picking on people in the meeting. So, hi Scott, thank you for joining us.
Oh, my pleasure. I've been looking forward to working with you folks.
Me too.
Thanks for having me.
Great to see you. Great to see you live. Seen your picture and we've emailed, but
well, a couple of pixels here and there. Maybe someday we'll see each other live. Yeah, it's a small world.
Well, I'm taller in person, but this isn't that. You know, it's not a bad profile.
I'm a lot younger in person, so.
funny, right? Camera adds a few years and a few pounds, as they say. You know? I wonder how many cameras I've got on me right now. That's what always worries me.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's great to see you, man. It is for sure. We're just kind of getting everybody's filing in now. This is the ad lib component of our program.
The improvisational part.
It is. It's like the news anchors, you know, if you see the people behind the camera, they're like, come on, play for time a bit. And it's kind of what we do, you know, as we roll into having everybody here.
Well, you know, I do a bit of public speaking like this, and in the first few minutes, I get a pretty good idea of what my audience is going to be like, and I have to admit, I already feel comfortable and at home. So I'm thinking that's a good indicator.
Good. Well, I've been seeing y'all have been presenting. You and Brendan have been presenting for a lot of the other PMI chapters as well. I know I saw Central Illinois, and I'm trying to keep track. There's been 3 or 4 of them that I've seen that y'all presented for. Is that correct?
Yeah, this topic has been growing in popularity. We speak on quite a range of topics, but we're getting a really strong feedback when we talk about this, because I think what people respond to, we'll see how it works out with your group. We try to speak to a real world case study selected from our work, and I think that gets people going. Plus, we're hoping that people will interact. I know going to have a lot of folks on the call, but if they can throw in their opinions and so forth in the chat stream, we're going to open up a couple of opportunities for them to do that.
Okay, that sounds great. So just to
Cool.
keep everybody
So go ahead, Tanya.
Oh, no, you go ahead.
No, I was gonna kind of talk to Scott about what I read from the blurb. The voice of the customer and the voice of the business, right? It sounds like you guys kind of have a process for eliciting these two voices, right? Eliciting the voice of the customer and then finding the balance with the voice of the business.
Yeah.
Sounds fascinating. Sounds like a great way of kind of storyboarding that relationship, right? And kind of like a customer strategy, right?
You know, I like the way you use the word storyboarding, because we're finding just the idea of stories really important. And oversimplifying it, but it's bringing the story of the business and the customers together, where sometimes even in very successful companies, they drift apart. And they kind of lose touch with what's really important with their customers. And so it's bringing them back together in ways that benefit all. Yeah, so we have a lot of fun doing it.
Nice. I like that. I like the concept, and I like the model. Super cool. I'm looking forward to it. Look, Tanya, I'm going to pitch to you and let you do some more of the ad lib, and
Okay, sure.
do a few announcements, but then we'll let a few
Right.
more people come in before we launch.
Right.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so the registration and Scott, this is totally normal in the beginning. We get a certain amount that's registered, and what we're seeing is usually about 60%. So we had a little over 100 register,
Yeah.
and we know, that it's things happen, things come up that night. So, just wanted to address the group and give a little bit of announcements for, so we do both virtual and we do in person, both in Baton Rouge and Louise and Lafayette. So this Thursday, we're having our 25-year anniversary as a chapter. And for those of you that are on the phone that are, fairly local and could feasibly make it, the registration is still open through tomorrow. And that's going to be a less formal event. That's probably more of reception center and buffet and networking and just people getting to relax and connect and get to know each other a lot better. So, and then in October, and this is even keeping Jared in the loop, we've got our virtual speaker. The next virtual speaker will be October 11th, Oliver Yarborough on AI. And actually next month, we're having an in-person speaker both in Baton Rouge and in Lafayette. So in Baton Rouge, it's going to be on the Tuesday, October 18th. We're partnering with the cost engineers again and having Dr. Brian Briggs talk. And then in Lafayette at Opportunity Machine, it's going to be Keisha Buteau talking about, the best laid plans and how to address the people more so than the processes. So we've got all of those on our website. Those are live, and we're working on another event, which is collaborating with the Los Angeles chapter. It's a virtual event towards the end of the month as well. So that's kind of a outlier event, but additional PDU earning opportunity for the folks on the phone that have got their credentials. So that's the big thing that I had. We're probably going to get several more joining us as we go along, but with that, we can go ahead and let Scott get started. So this is Scott. Is it Stribrny?
That's right.
Okay, from Group Atlantic. And Atlantic Group, you've been doing presentations to the different PMI chapters on the voice of the customer for some time now. So I'd love for you to tell us about how you got started on that and give us a little bit more context about you.
Oh, yeah. Well, I've been doing this for a while, and I often learn the hard way, as they say. And what I learned along the way was the more I listened actively, empathetically, earnestly to what the customer actually needed, I was better off on the projects that I was fortunate enough to be chosen to lead. And it seems like it's become a lifelong passion for me to keep figuring that out, because people are involved. And it's so challenging to try to understand what all people really need to get their work done, and not just take kind of a inside out, build it and they will come a perspective. So that's what led us to begin telling stories about how we've been working with our clients to mind the voice of the customer in order to primarily help them grow through improved net new revenue and improved margins. And so that's a little bit of background about the story we're going to talk about today. We're actually going to go into some depth to explain an 8-step process, but it's going to be through how we did that for a particular client and the success that they were able to achieve.
That sounds great. So we are a little bit early, but we can go ahead and get started if you're in.
Okay, let me go ahead and I'm gonna share the screen. Are we good to go here?
Yes, I can see it.
Okay, great. All right, well, thank you everyone. As people are joining us, welcome. And we're going to do a couple of kind of like what the talk is about in a little bit more detail than what I just did. But thanks for joining. You know, it's a sign to me of true professionalism when anyone dedicates an evening like this to networking with their professional colleagues and coming together. Maybe we're going to learn from each other. And thanks for letting me be a part of that tonight. So could go ahead and we're going to break the presentation down into this agenda. We're going to start by talking a little bit about just how important is it for each of you to innovate? To what extent as project management, whether you're a project team member or a leader of projects, to what extent is it important to innovate? And to what extent are your projects expected to deliver business results that emerge from innovation? And so we'll talk a little bit about a company that's a 1 billion size company that will give you a little bit of background on it. Then we're going to step you through a process that we use to help mind not only the voice of the customer, but also the voice of the business and bring them together in a way that satisfies a wide range of stakeholders. And we'll take a look at 2 specific steps because it'll give us a chance to see some example deliverables. They're typically part of these kinds of projects. And the deliverables are going to be representing certain kinds of techniques along the way. So any project that we use, any process we use during a project has got different methods and techniques and so forth. We'll show you some detailed examples in steps 2 and 3 of the 8-step process. And I'm inviting you to ask questions or interrupt me at any time. I'll look to Tanya for a little bit of help on that. Tanya, if you can keep an eye on the chat stream, that'll help me out a lot.
Sure will.
Kind of got a busy screen here. And particularly if you're not kind of like an everyday user of Zoom, make sure you orient yourself to the chat area because hopefully you're going to enter some thoughts as we go along and that'll make it more of a discussion. But certainly you can interrupt and if you need Tanya's help to interrupt me, that's fine. But I'm interested in your questions of clarification as we go along. And we'll probably have a little bit of time towards the end as well. By the way, at the end, I'm going to provide both the contact information for myself as well as my associate, Brendan Dory, who unfortunately is still traveling. We thought he was going to be able to join us, but he's not quite finished business traveling at this point in time. So reach out to us after this evening. And if you have a question that occurs to you tomorrow or next week or next month, we'd be happy to chat with you about what kind of answers you're looking for and how we can provide that for you. So if we continue here, let's think a little bit more about the age that we seem to be living in, where innovation is an imperative. We hear a lot about it. You're starting to see more of it in the trade press. And from what we're seeing, it's indeed a must-have mindset for leaders. And that includes project leaders, not just executive leaders. And in fact, you may have seen in a PMI study, PMI does lots of research for us. And in one study, they found that 7 in 10 project professionals say that their organizations indeed invest in innovation. And the good news is they reward innovation as well. So I don't know if that's the case of your organizations or not, but that sounds like happy news, doesn't it? So if we take a closer look at other research, in this case, what Price Waterhouse revealed. They took a hard look at what does it mean to be an innovation leader? And it turns out their studies are showing that to grow, it takes innovation. I found particularly interesting that what they're saying is very much like what we're going to describe in tonight's case study that we're going to describe. And that a select few in PwC's data set, just 20% of all the companies they researched, well, about a quarter of all the, let me step back, about a quarter of all the companies they researched consider themselves as innovation leaders. Now you can kind of self-brand yourself that, I guess, without being that. But among those, just 20% saw 15% or more growth in a 5-year period. And you're going to see that we actually exceeded that in the example that we're going to show you tonight. And only about 13% of all the others saw the same level of growth. So that's all fine, you know, statistics are great. The question is, how do you get there? And based on our experience, we're going to describe how we think we get there. And the first place to start, we found, is getting clarity, specificity, and then insights about which one of these 5 things, among others perhaps, but which one of these 5 things for discussion purposes tonight might be relevant to the work of the people that are on the call. We've got something like 38 people logged in so far. And so if you could throw into the chat stream by number, 1 or more of these 5 numbers that you say, yeah, just top of mind, don't have to think about this too much. These particular numbers are, I would say, definitely relevant to my work situation, my organization. So go ahead and throw into the chat stream, whether it's 1 or more of 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5, just enter them in by number. And we'll give them a minute or so, Tanya, and if maybe you can kind of selectively debrief what scrolls past in the chat stream. There is, for if you're not aware of it, there is a way for in Zoom, for example, at the end of the session today, to save the chat stream for yourself into a .txt file.
We do, yeah.
I find that pretty helpful.
It is.
And so if what, not so much we're recording this whole thing, but you know, I think you might even find more interesting what some of your colleagues are going to be contributing into the chat stream than what I'll be.
We save all the Zooms. So whenever, you know, our process after everything is we save all the Zooms, we upload them, but we also save the transcripts too. So I have found myself going back over some of those, and it helps me even just to understand our members and what they're saying at different points too.
Yeah. Yeah, we found that it kind of leads to follow on conversations that people have with one another and deeper discussions where people do continue learning as a result. Any results rolling in here?
Oh yeah. So we have one conversation that my company is aggressively pushing cross-selling of services. We have a vote for 4, 2, 1, 2, 5, 2, and then Sheena's asking if we will get a copy of the slide deck.
Yes, I'd be happy to do that. What I'll be doing is sending a portable document format version of the slide deck.
Okay.
Yeah, happy to share that.
Sure.
Definitely.
Sure.
Won't do that until after the talk though, so.
Oh, that's fine.
I'm
Fine.
not
And for the
quite
people
that
on the phone, it may be a
started.
couple of days before I can send that out with the travel
There
in the
you go.
25 years. So
Yeah.
maybe a few.
Well, good. Thanks for those of you that have thrown some ideas into the chat stream. Now, I'm always going to be asking along the way, you're going to notice this as a pattern, so what? And here's what I mean by that. When we look at these types of things that we might measure in our work environment, we might ask ourselves, compared to what? Okay, compared to what? So let's take a look at some other research on slide 6 that was done by the Aberdeen group. And it takes all 5 of those that I presented to you in the last slide and actually attaches some data to it. And it's data that compares and contrasts those organizations that follow some sort of voice of the customer process, an emphasis on voice of the customer, going beyond just the hype and the buzzword of voice of the customer. I find there's a lot of that. When I ask, well, exactly what do you do? Well, we do voice of the customer. Didn't I just say that? And so, no, but I'm looking for what are the steps? What are the techniques? And that's what we're going to delve into tonight a little bit more. But notice the striking difference between the left-hand histogram and the right-hand histogram. Here, for revenue, net new revenue from customers, looking at 43.2% year over year compared to 5.5% over on the left-hand side. And if you go look at the far extreme on the right-hand side, and there's kind of a Pareto ordering here, the average profit margin per customer, not very good. So looks like we stand head and shoulders well more than that above our competition when we take seriously a systematic approach to this business of voice of the customer and use it to innovate and drive value, achieve net new revenue, improve profit margins, as well as some of the other things that we see here that might have lined up with what is top of mind for you today. So we're going to be starting to slice down and narrow down on a couple of these so we can see how we were able to do that sort of thing. So in the next segment, give you a little background on this one particular company. But before I do that, I'd like to kind of give you a little bit better idea of a whole range of companies. So at Group Atlantic, we've established a voice of the customer based process. We found that systematic way of doing things helps to support successful growth, wide range of companies. You take a look at the left hand, all the way on the left hand side, it's a small $2 million engineering services company, all the way, just 4 examples here, but all the way on the right hand side, $1 billion infrastructure equipment manufacturing company. Each and every one of these and other clients have enjoyed substantial growth through projects, but it was when they followed an 8-step process. That means that they were systematic and it was a first things first approach to the voice of the customer. And by the way, reconciling that against the voice of the business. So let's go ahead and explore through a case study what those steps might be like. So we'll give you a little bit more background on that and that company. So this $1 billion company was in the business of providing IT infrastructure. It was founded by an entrepreneur and grew it from nothing in about a 50-year period to over $1 billion. Quite an American success story, really. And with that client, as with all our clients, began by understanding their value chain, like the one that you see on the slide here. And so in this case, their end customer, if you go all the way to the left-hand side or the upstream part of the value chain, their customer really was Blue Cross Blue Shield. And in this case, Blue Cross Blue Shield needed a telemedicine kind of platform. So when that happens, an insurance company like Blue Cross turns to usually a system integrator. In this case, it was a company like WWT. And WWT hosted a platform, a data center, and they designed that data center for performance, because Blue Cross wants performance and they want efficiency. So they design it to those major parameters. And then the physical infrastructure to implement this stuff is outsourced to a contractor. And that contractor seeks something entirely different. They're looking for best price, lowest price usually, and availability. I need to install this data center right now. I got to go get this. Is it on the shelf? Can I get it now? And they usually go through distributors to get that. So when we did an analysis about this, a voice of the customer analysis, and thinking about there are different customers along this value chain. So if we look at the entirety of the value chain, very important, we look at it holistically, it helps us with a deeper understanding of that value chain, and it reveals opportunities. I mean, that's really the focal point of the analysis. Where are there opportunities to reposition our client's offering, perhaps? And in this case, the analysis revealed that while those contractors were buying IT infrastructure stuff, they were just looking for price and availability. We found that it might be very much better, and we would enjoy much better margins if that would be commanded if we could position the sale of our $1 billion clients' products directly to the system integrator, where the real value for Blue Cross Blue Shield was being delivered. And in fact, sell at a price premium as a result. So that's a little bit of background of the success story. Now, of course, there was more to it than that, right? Is that we needed to be able to close value gaps, and to do that, you need to figure out where the value gaps are. So the reason our client was able to move up market was because through our process, we were able to early on in the early steps identify where there were value gaps, where we were falling short, not just of the aspirational goals of our $1 billion client, but their end customer, Blue Cross Blue Shield. So the better we understood what those end goals were way up on the beginning of the value stream at Blue Cross, we could begin to see what kind of value gaps were being closed by the system integrator, in this case, WWT. So let's take a look at the two examples here. The first gap was time to market. How long does it take us to get the material, cabinets and cabling and connectors and trays and all this sort of thing, cooling systems and all that, that builds up a data center. And because the end customer is looking for solutions sooner rather than later. So helping to identify where there might be time to market gaps. One was that instead of having the contractors order wires and cables and cabinets and take their best chance at wiring up the correct way, which sometimes didn't work out all that well, and they used the wrong cabling for the data bandwidth that was needed. Won't go too down in the weeds here with the technical details, but the innovation here was to pre-cable it per the system integrator's needs, representing what Blue Cross Blue Shield needed to put up its telemedicine platform. Now we would pre-configure with all the correct cabling and everything that would prevent problems and outages and slowdowns and that sort of thing for Blue Cross Blue Shield once it was installed, but installed with the wrong equipment. So that collapsed time to market, collapsed it in half, by the way. And the next was efficient use of floor space. We don't have to be very familiar with data centers to know that floor space is by the foot, pay for these facilities by the foot. And by innovating, in this case, some thermal-based software solutions to improve cooling of these cabinets, they were able to reduce floor space by 40%. So that's kind of like the detailed story there. Here were the results. So at the onset of the 8-step process that we're about to describe, it's really important to anchor it in an aspirational goal. Where are we going with this? And for the $1 billion client we had, it was about becoming the preferred infrastructure supplier for co-location data centers. And so they wanted to be the preferred supplier. That's what they wanted to be known for. That was going to be adding to the brand that they had developed over like 50 years. Now, to go beyond that, we need something that we can sink our teeth into, the objective goal. So the objective goal was by year 3, generating 15 million net new revenue. So this $1 billion business had several sub-businesses. One of them was a $300 million business. So in 3 years, they wanted to add 15 million net new revenue at 50% margin. So the result of the 8 steps that we're about to describe helped them exceed those goals, so that by year 3, they were partnering with 8, not 6 system integrators, and they were generating 20 million in net new revenue at 68 gross margin, not just not just 15 net new revenue. So pretty impressive results. I think it's in the ballpark of what PwC was saying is kind of among the best of the best. That's why Brendan and I chose this example of a sizable company that did something like this. So how do we go about these 8 steps? All right, so we're going to start gently and then go into more and more detail. Strategic clarity matters, and it starts with basic fundamental questions like, do we have a vision for the future? What is it? Are there multiple visions for the future? Do they need to be homogenized and reconciled? Do we know externally what are the key trends that are impacting whatever industry that you happen to be in? And we have to have a notion that's more than a hope for the best. We have to have an idea. How do we plan to use innovation, not just for innovation's sake, but to respond to the vision and to realize that vision and to respond to what we think might be opportunities that are emerging out of these key trends in the industry. So those are the 3 key questions. How do we know we're making progress towards getting the right answers to those kind of questions? Well, I'm an aviator, an amateur aviator. I have been for a while. And we love to use checklists. You know, we use a checklist before we get in the airplane. We use a checklist before we start the engines. We use a checklist before we take off, and so on and so on. And usually when I have passengers, they appreciate that because they don't want their afternoon spoiled because I didn't use the right checklist at the right time. Same thing in the kind of work that we do as professional project leaders, right? So the first sign that we have strategic clarity is that there's evidence that we know where the growth is expected in the next 1 to 5 years. And by that, we mean in what product areas, what sectors, what geographic regions. And what is it that we actually intimately understand with empathy about our customers and the way they make decisions about buying either what we sell in way of services or products and what our competitors sell. And interestingly, you'll see a little bit of evidence of this in a little bit later actual example, or what they could just do themselves, that they'll just throw their hands up and say, we're not going to buy from anybody. We're just going to do it ourselves. So in some cases, that end customer is in competition with the suppliers. We've seen actually that as an overlooked competitive threat. We have finite resources, finite number of people, finite talent, finite money, finite time, all the rest. So we need to really understand where to prioritize and focus and channel the limited investments that we have to support those priorities. And make sure that the understanding of those priorities are well understood throughout all levels of the organization so that every day we're seeing, if you walk through the organization, every decision throughout the organization knows what to do, what not to do, how well to do it, who to hire, who not to fire, who to fire, all clearly aligned with strategic priorities. And what we're talking about there is the aspirational objective and the aspirational goals and the objective goal that I mentioned earlier. So that's what we look for. Is it going well? And how do we go about getting to this? Well, it's more than those 3 simple questions. You might imagine that there are more questions to be asked and to get good, useful answers of. So let's take a look at banks of questions that might represent the next level of detail in this process. So if we take a look at this, you're going to see lots and lots and lots of questions, and they're grouped according to what I would call question banks. And each question bank has a 1-word title. So you see everything from planning all the way down to customers, from scaling all the way up to risks and everything in between. So there are all these sorts of questions. And no, we don't have all that much time together tonight. So what I'd like you to do is kind of speed read through, just kind of browse through these question banks. And if you can, even if you can't get through all of the question banks that are on the slide, if you could find one that you said, hey, you know what, this is, and you might say this to yourself silently, right? I think this is a pretty good set of questions. And that's why I want that PDF that Scott's going to send to Tanya and distribute. So go ahead and do that. And what I'd like you to do is, if you find one that you think this is a pretty good set of questions, enter into the chat stream that question bank by name. And Tanya, if you can keep an eye on that, do that right now. And Tanya, if you can keep an eye on the chat stream as they enter in the names of the question banks that seem to resonate with them.
I see scale.
Cool. Thank you.
Solutions. I like credibility, and then pain points.
Credibility is one that resonates with project managers, right?
It is. It's like, do you have a viable product? Can you back this up, or does it just? You need to have the feedback and the evidence.
Yeah. If you say you got a viable product, how do you know? How do I know that you've got a viable product, right? Great. Well, I'm hopeful when you get this deck, you'll have a chance to take a more careful, critical look, a well-studied look at these questions, and perhaps you'll be able to adapt them to your context and situation, and perhaps even adopt them for your own purposes. Again, it's a checklist approach. Now, I might be wondering, looking at these great questions, so wait a minute, which ones do I ask first? Which ones do I ask later? In what order? And how do I get answers to these questions? Great question, How do you get the answer to that? I've tried and it doesn't usually work out. So that's where we're going next with this. So any other entries into the chat stream before we move on?
We've got scale. So, and one thing, I'll put this in the question bank, but it'll be for later to address, is even what types of tools and templates that once you go through these different things that you may use. But I know that that may be something that is coming up later in the presentation too.
Yep, we've got lots and lots of them, and we're going to
Okay.
show you, I'm hopefully, quite a few within the hour that we have together.
Okay,
So-
sounds great.
Great responses, great questions, maybe. What we need is great answers. So that's where we're going to walk through this 8-step process. So let's go ahead and get started. I've been talking about it for a while. So there's 8 steps. We're going to take the first 4, and then we'll take the last 4. So if you look at these, in above the 1, 2, 3, 4 line, you'll see the questions repeated from the previous page. So in step 1, we're looking at just one of the many question banks. In this case, it's customers. What do we know about our customers? Let's go find out. All right. So in our process, the first step, we call this process market power growth, by the way, because of its attention to the marketplace and the customers. It's to establish that aspirational objective goal that we talked about earlier. I gave you an example from a $1 billion client. And it's going to take a look at the current state of the business. How's it going? Where are they at in their life cycle and so forth? Have they had 26 years of record quarters, as one of my clients, Walgreens, did? Or did we just come out of 2 or 3 losing quarters? That has a lot to do with the demeanor of people trying to answer questions about voice of the business. What do they think? What are their hypotheses, the leaders of the business, about where there are opportunities to grow? So we're capturing their hypotheses about growth. And the output of that first step is a structured voice of the customer plan that includes target interviewees, who we're going to go talk to, who are we going to observe in their work situations, what are the objectives of the voice of the customer research that we're going to do, that we're going to now reconcile or run up against the growth hypotheses of the voice of the business. So below the line that you see here, the little check boxes are a simplified checklist for that step. So although there are 8 steps, there are many sub-steps that are represented by the checklist. And then the items that are have little check marks by it are deliverables. So as project managers, we're very interested at what point in the life cycle of a project are we delivering what deliverables, what are the milestones for each of the deliverables, starts to suggest a work breakdown structure and all those sorts of things, right? So you might think about this as starting with a backbone of a work breakdown structure that project managers can use as well. It follows a process that's tailored towards innovation that drives value and growth. So let's take a look at the second step. And we use that to establish the customer pain points. So now we're going out there and finding out directly from customers what those are. And we're focusing in on what for them is urgent, what for them is compelling to be solved, for what them is valuable to be solved. And we're beginning, but later we're going to get a better idea of how they value it. We do this by employing several different techniques, and we're going to show you some in a little bit, like lead user interviews. And we're going to also do workplace observations, getting closer to where the actual valued work is getting done and how the people actually do it. Now how it's on paper, but what do they actually do day to day? What's a day in the life of? And then we review that to get customer feedback data. So in step 3, that's to develop potential solutions. We're beginning to see the pain points. We're starting to see potential hypothetical solutions, but these are all just potential. They're candidates. They're not done deals. We need to validate those types of things, right? So what we're trying to do is line up solutions with the pain points that are well within our initial client's capabilities. So it's near term. We don't have to acquire new capabilities to deliver a solution. Then we develop a description of the solution. Sometimes it's something like a brochure, something that might be like a sample website, something that is a prototype to get people excited about the idea about what can be done. And then we collect the data from a target customer and we regard we get them helping us get respectable quantified value to those solutions. So we're getting early discussions of what might this be worth to them, right? It's still not credible yet. We still have much more due diligence and validations to do. Credibility continues to be sought in the fourth step. Here we're aggregating the data collected and organizing it into a business case. You'd be surprised at how many organizations don't really give adequate attention to a solid business case. Or if they do, they don't revisit it throughout the life cycle. And rarely is it revisited. We actually have research on this through some work I do through Loyola University Chicago. Very rarely is it revisited at the end of a project. Business case is based on various kinds of things like the size of the customer base, the perceived value of the new offering by the customers, the cost to produce the offering. Is there even anywhere in the ballpark of a sound ROI? The plans include things like preferred buying behavior. So it's a really intimate understanding of what the customer is all about. It's also about identifying risks, what could go wrong, which are the critical few things that are worthy of our attention that can go wrong. And so, by the way, the Project Management Institute commissioned Dr. Bill Ibbs to take a look at all the knowledge areas. This is quite a long time ago at this point. And his results were that of all the knowledge areas, the single most closely correlated to project success is risk management, and the least practiced of all the knowledge areas is risk management. So I do talks on risk management as well, but it's built into what we do because we can't afford to take wrong turns. We have to minimize the number of wrong turns that we take, and we have to have aversion strategies ready to go, and step 4 provides that. So now that we're turning the corner and we're taking a look at steps 5 through 8, which these steps are very iterative now, that we'll tend to repeat this as we go through scaling. The 5th step is to develop a minimum viable offering. And why? Well, because with that, we're going to establish, will they actually buy it? Okay, they said they would buy it. Now, are they buying it? Who's buying it? How are they buying it? Where is that what we thought was the buying behavior not showing up, and how do we have to inspect what the reality is and adapting? So by the way, an agile approach to this has been very successful. An agile approach to this whole project, the $1 billion project that we're talking about right here, was one of the keys to success. And not just the buying behavior for another report in the drawer, but to validate what needs to be true for success and what remains to be put into place in order to be successful. So it's a small investment at this point. It's a small investment, and that's part of our risk aversion approach. So now by piloting it, we're learning. And so the 6th step is to sell the minimum viable offering in the marketplace, and now collecting broader data about the perceived value. And here we're looking for overall percentage of acceptance of the solutions that are part of the minimum viable offering in the target base. It's surprising to us, even internally within an organization, even if you're innovating for end users within your own organization, you're not really selling it to an outside paying customer. I've worked with a CTO, and we talked through something like this, and I asked him, oh, okay, thank you for explaining to me that thing that you've got out there, and it's out there for a year. Now I ask the question like, well, what percentage of all the end users that you had hoped to use this stuff that's out there for a year, how many actually did? And he turned to his senior director and said, yeah, that's a good question. And the director had no answer. That was not a very good day for the director, by the way. That was not my intent. My intent was, let's find out. Let's find out, because often we build the wrong stuff. So here what we're trying to learn is what is the right stuff, so that we iterate the minimum viable offering to be closer and closer to what is selling in the marketplace. And in step 7, we devise the solution on what? Based on data that we gather during the pilot selling phase and so forth. And the assumptions in the business case are revisited. Okay, which assumptions were wrong? Which assumptions were right? And we update the business case and the business plan, and we define them. And in step 8, the most successful parts, we keep the best stuff, right? The most successful parts of the pilot solution are scaled up and sold to a much larger portion. Now that we've tested it on a small scale, we start to scale it up based on our credibility and our validation. We've done that at less risk and at more success. And we iterate all steps 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 as we continuously improve the process. So given that quick walkthrough of that 8 steps, let's take a closer look at steps 2 and 3, because those 2 steps emphasize voice of the customer. And hour's presentation, we can probably give you more specific details in 2 out of the 8 steps. If we had a little bit more time, we could give you details on any of the 8 steps and more. Why the voice of the customer is so important is what we're going to try to answer by showing you some detail of the next 2 steps. Why is it so important? Let's take a look at that with some example principles in action, techniques, deliverables, maybe some of the things you'll see next, you'll consider templates and so forth. Let's go ahead and take a look at those. So we'll first go into step 2. And before we get into templates and so forth, maybe you recognize this gentleman. His name was Jack Welch, former CEO of General Electric. You might have heard of him, right? I believe strongly that he had a bit of wisdom here that's well worth revisiting. And he said, look, to be competitive, we have to have an ability to do what? To learn. Learn what? To learn more about our customers than our competition. To learn more and faster than the competition. Is that enough? Welch says, no, that's not enough. You also have to have the ability to turn that learning into action. Action meaning product offerings faster than the competitors, because it's about that learning cycle. So it's kind of like the philosophy of the mindset going forward into step 2. And let's take a revisit a little bit more detail on the PwC data. What's interesting here is that while some companies, when we work with them initially, they say, we've been in this business for years and years and years, and we know what all the answers are. They don't really have a mindset for engaging their customers, let alone make that an essential part of their strategy for innovation. And so here it shows that the majority of innovation leaders do indeed, they think of customers as part of the team for innovation and growth that mutually benefits them, right? So let's take a look at, if we blew up the details on step 2, we'd see that the sub-steps were to prepare a voice of the customer discussion guide, to conduct and then document the captured voice of the customer. We're going to show you examples of that, how we go about doing it. How do we synthesize voice of the customer? We got bits and pieces, and it comes to us in all kinds of different orders, and it doesn't always make sense. So how do we synthesize that into something meaningful that's going to inform and drive value and innovation and growth? And how do we categorize the unmet needs? Because there's more needs here than we can get done sooner. So we need to be able to prioritize those. That's what I mean by categorization primarily, and in other ways you'll see. So we're going to show you some examples of actual documented customer feedback and how to prioritize using a stylized Kano diagram. Okay, so let's take a look at this thought kind of experiment. Often we get our customer insights reactively, right? It's because the help desk is getting customer complaints, and finally they get funneled and channeled to us in some way, shape, or form. And more often than not, we might find that it's an ugly experience because we'd rather not disappoint customers and fall short of their expectations. And we certainly don't want to hear about it when a customer executive is calling our executive, and now we're hearing about it from our executive. Completely reactive kind of feedback. It's important feedback. It's not enough. We need to add proactive feedback where we take initiative to identify and engage sources to give us insights into what the customer's expectations in the future are. And that means engaging them, okay? So let's take a look at what are the main considerations for engaging them. Well, I might have been off one slide here when I was just speaking to this, and this was the graphic that was going to the reactive versus proactive. Sorry about that. Got a little ahead of myself. So let's proceed to this slide. If we're going to engage the customer, it takes some forethought in planning so as to most effectively and efficiently utilize our resources to get answers to the kind of questions we've been rolling up so far in our talk today. So we're thinking about, well, if we've early on in our 8-step process captured voice of the business, hypotheses, how they think they're going to grow, what do we need to gather from the customer in the way of hypotheses to validate or invalidate the voice of the business hypotheses? And as you already started tipping me off, you're interested in what techniques are we going to use. So we'll show you. And who do we go visit and what protocols to follow? So yep, we got to do that. And that our elicitation guide has got to have answers to those questions. And so with regard to what hypotheses are we going to be validating, we need to take another checklist out. Here we have a diagrammatic style checklist. And often we find that when there is an attempt to engage customers, it's only on one, maybe two of these different checklist items, and other areas are ignored. So here, what we're reminding ourselves is, how does the customer even discover what our offerings are? What's their experience in using our offerings historically, or even some of the early offerings that maybe we have a beta release or whatever to get early feedback or a minimum viable offering experience? What's their experience with the serviceability, the service response to these offerings? How about how our services and products are bundled together? How are they packaged? What's their experience with that? How easy is it to buy from us? All those kinds of things. And where have they actually had a breakthrough favorable experience that might be an epiphany for us for a new product offering? So the idea here is to cover all these bases in our planning of how to engage the customer and begin following these two principles. One, we do best when we get closer and closer geographically. And this is an interesting challenge in the world of pandemic, right? Closer and closer to where the work is being done. So here in process observation, maybe we can do it remotely via Zoom call. What we're really interested in is not talking to people in their conference room and we're in our conference room, but on the far right-hand side is we're actually gathering evidence of user behavior, that users are doing the work of the day and generating value as a result. And sometimes they're doing workarounds. They're working around our products to get that done. That's what we're after. That's the goal of that sort of thing. The other is, to what extent vertically can we intervene with the users? So by that, we might need to engage them in a question. We might ask them to explain what they're doing as they're doing the work. So it's actually stopping them, asking them open-ended questions. And the optimal, most effective elicitation technique is that technique that gets us as close as possible to where the work process is being done and where we are intimately interacting with the end user. In fact, we might even get to a point where the end user says, okay, well, I've shown you how to do it. Now you do it. Let's see how easy it is for you to get the job done under these stressor circumstances using your product solution. So the idea here is an informed choice of techniques among all these techniques are on different places on this. And if we have to fall to the left and lower on this chart with, we'll say, let's a suboptimal technique, we have to know that we're going to be exposed to risk of not getting the right answers or all the answers. That might figure into a project manager's risk plan. If our resources constrained us not to be able to do the upper right, but maybe just the lower left kind of techniques. And so what else do we do? We don't have time to perhaps visit all many tens or hundreds or millions of users. So we need to choose wisely. And we need to be able to we need to look beyond just interacting with our happy customers, but also with those that might not be so happy. And that's never the most pleasant experience to look forward to. And not just the smartest lead users, but sometimes the trailing users that are laggards in full utilization of what we offer to the marketplace and so on and so forth. The idea behind this type of analysis that a project manager might do in helping to decide how big is this project, how many people are going to be involved in what ways, is to say, well, look, we're going to need to have a combination of some unhappy lead users in segment D, market segment D, some happy users that are trailing users in segment B, and some unhappy mainstream users in segment E. Is that enough? Well, we've got a fourth combination, but we ran out of people in time. Oh, well, what could you do if we did give you that fourth combination? And now there's a dialogue. What I found as a project leader when I have this kind of discussion, sponsors and the people that are in charge of some sort of funding, if I don't have discretion over the funding, and I have to go to someone else, they start to see that my team and I have thought through this, and then we can recommend to them what we need. We need a fourth combination to visit yet another type of user beyond the three that we've already just discussed, and here's why. Now they thought about this, and it seems to make sense. I think we can start talking to them about giving them some more money. Who do we visit? Well, we just began answering that question in one way, and here's another way. Some of you might have read the book, Crossing the Chasm. I commend the book to you. And here's the deal. It's a failed approach to try to throw the minimum viable offering to all the folks out there in your market space. This left to right ordering is superior alternative. And it's described in Crossing the Chasm, and we use it as part of the 8 steps. So what we first do is we find through our client, who are the lead users in your client organization, in your customer organizations, because they're going to be the first ones we want to begin getting an understanding of what's needed in the marketplace. And there's a reason for that, is because whatever minimum viable offering we come up with that I described when I walked you through the 8 steps for those lead users, successes of those lead users must be harvested and seen by early adopters. You see the percentages there. The innovators are only 2.5% of the overall market space. The early adopters, another 13.5%, are waiting to see when they're satisfied, when the early adopters are satisfied that the innovators are making some beneficial use of the MVO, then they will try it. And yep, you're a step ahead of me. We need to capture the success stories of the early adopters, because that's right, the early majority are waiting for them to perfect it, because the early majority is not as much a risk taker as the early adopters, and not as early as a risk taker as the innovators, and so on. So there is a ordered succession of our approach of minimal viable offerings and scaling based on the demand, and it doesn't happen because if you keep driving it beyond the early majority, late majority, and laggard stage, and that's what the author calls the chasm. It's because you didn't do your due diligence at getting credible wins for lead users called early adopters and innovators before you started pitching them to early majority and late majority. So this is a secret to success for the scaling approach. So the question here is, do you even know your market demographics? So part of this is we work with our client to figure out what the market demographics are. So we give a prioritization of the MVO launches and deployments and so forth. The next is, well, what do we want to know about those lead users or any end user for any of the capabilities that are a valued solution space? This is an example of a persona. It's a technique, or take a look at this and think of this as a template that we fill in that says, okay, what might be one kind of lead user? And we start by the way that lead users think, and we try to capture a quote. Here it says, our current differentiation is not sustainable. We are in a constant race with our competitors, and that resets every few months. That was actually a quote from a lead user in the system integrator space, like WWT. And a real person that was a lead user with this was this Joe Rossetti. And we start to characterize, what are Joe's motivations? What are his goals? And if his goals represent the broader goals of other early lead users, and if the successful achievement of those goals might be of interest through documented success stories of the early adopters and then the early mainstream users, we're going to be wanting to zero in on those things, and specifically what kind of pain points. Remember, we're bringing back pain points into early steps 2 and 3. And then we start to characterize Joe and various behavior dials that we try to get a sense. And this is not the only one, but it's an example. And we develop personas for lead users and each successive category that I just walked you through in the chasm example. Well, how do we find a lead user? Well, when we ask for permission to start talking with the customers of our client, we're going to be using this checklist to help narrow it down, and so that we're helping our client identify those people that are going to be best interviewed, those people that are going to be very helpful if we watch what they do and observe whatever the proprietary observation and non-disclosure agreements and that sort of thing. So we use checklists like this when we go about choosing. In fact, we have a client right now where we're going into, and our early work has really helped our client trust us. So just today I was told they're inviting us to go to their annual conference early in October, because they said, oh, this will be a great opportunity for you to meet to some of these very lead users you're talking about, Scott and Brendan. So we sit down with our client and say, great, who that's likely going to be at that conference where you're going to have a trade show presence that fits the bill like these 10 points. And we sit down and we start to figure out real people and real names and putting them on a calendar. Now, when we get a chance to interview those folks, here's the detail that we capture when we look at what do we want to capture from them. We want to know what their actual life experience, not what they want, but telling us about their daily lives, all right? And so when we document their customer statements, it's exactly that. Their quotes, what did they actually say? So when we say voice of the customer, it's not generic jibber jabber that's been massaged and boiled down and diluted. It's something that people actually say. And sometimes these quotes are very compelling, especially when they say, it shouldn't be like that. It should be way more like this. And how hard can that be? I'm not asking for much. It affects my work life every single day, right? So we have a construct where we capture the statements, each individual statement, and we attribute it to particular people, their names and initials, and who did we interview and when, and contact information so we can circle back and interview them again if we need to, because it's a very serendipitous kind of path. You learn something, you start to make sense of it, and sometimes you have to learn more, so you go back. So here we have a template on slide 37 of how we start to aggregate in the customer statement column groupings based on the questions we asked or based on how we prompted them to do something that we would observe. Here we show typical use customer statements, what they like customer statements, what they don't like customer statements. So we're organizing the customer statements according to those groups. And for any given customer statement, then what we do is we say, well, okay, that's from the customer's perspective. So what might the solution need to do? So now we're shifting our perspective to a solution, and we start interpreting the need through solution statements. And we say, well, it's got to do this, and it's got to do these other things. So now these are the identifications of a multitude, really, it becomes a multitude of all kinds of opportunities where there are shortfalls, where there are gaps of what the customer needs. Too many, we can't do them all. We need to prioritize them and order them. So many of you that have your PMPs might have remembered the quality tools. One of the quality tools is using things like Kano diagrams, and this is a stylized version of the Kano diagram. Basically, it's because it represents two things. Of all the multitude of problems that we can solve, that we can come up with a solution to solve certain value gaps, which ones are more important than others? So here, their solutions are ordered from left to right in terms of importance. More important on the right, less important on the left. And in the vertical, which of these solutions really will differentiate us from our competitors, where the competitors aren't going to be able to easily copy that. So the low differentiators are lower, and the higher differentiators are up higher on the chart. And we start to color code them to say which of these solutions are more about the experience that we want the end user to have, that has value and will allow us to grow. And which ones are services that provide the solution space? Which ones are the products? Which ones are the combinations of products and services? And then if you look at the circles, some of them have only partial circles, and that gives a sense of it as a high, medium, or low kind of contribution. So we're saying if it's a more fully filled circle, it's going to have more weight than something else that was in close proximity on the chart. So the idea of you doing basically this step, part of step 2, helps us get a menu of potential problems to be solved. It helps us to narrow it down to a critical few as opposed to the trivial many that are what? Worthy of the project team's further consideration. Can't waste our time boiling the ocean. Offerings are a typical combination of the reds and the greens and the blues, or the experience and service and product, or combinations thereof. And so we look for gaps in the must-haves, gaps in the performance measurables, and gaps in the differentiators. By boiling those down into a critical few, that allows us to do other things. So let's take a look at what we were able to do in step 3. Here, we're broadening it out to not just maybe one customer and just the lead users, but a broader competitive landscape, taking it into its entirety and helping to further customize and tailor the offering and the minimum viable offering. So let's take a look at how we go about that. Well, we start to, once again, use a checklist to think about in what ways do we need to particularly address differentiation. So if you like, take a look at these 8 examples and enter by number which one or more of these 8 might be relevant to the kind of differentiators that you need to concern yourself with if you were about to go on an 8-step process like this. Go ahead and enter that into the chat stream now. And if Tanya, if you could debrief that for us, we've only got a few minutes left, right?
All right. Let's see. Diane said number 6. Christy said number 2.
You guys are hot on that chat button. I love it. Sometimes I'm waiting a minute before we hear it. And
2 and 6. Shaki said 2.
yeah, not every differentiator is relevant for every customer segment, for every product line, and that sort of thing. So you need to kind of think about this and test it. Like, and sometimes maybe find one that the voice of the business is, oh, this is not even relevant. There sometimes can be surprises. And I think that's where sometimes we add value as being outside consultants. We say, what about this? What about that? And we reveal that there was a missed differentiator that is just the thing that is the $1 million kind of opportunity. Well, thank you all for contributing. I appreciate that. So what do we do with that is a little bit busier slide. We call this a strategy on a page. And the idea is to help us gather what we say yes to and what we say no to. And if you look on the leftmost column, we've boiled down bunches and bunches of problems that could be solved to a critical, let's say 5 problems to be solved. A complete infrastructure cable included. This is coming back to the $1 billion company as an actual example from that work. And they're ordered vertically based on, if you look at what's in the red box and below, for each of those solutions, ranking them based on the value that they offer to the end user and how much would it cost. So we're looking for low cost, high value kind of combinations and bubbling them up to the top of the list. And then taking a closer look among those critical few, further boiling it down to take a look at what our competitor suppliers are doing. What could the customer do for themselves, and how do we, our client, for Group Atlantic's client, how do they stand? Poor or better or outstanding, and where do they need to be? So here we see some arrows that move us to where they're on a column 2, that they need to go to level 4, and these will be our differentiators. So we need to, for example, for designing a service documented infrastructure, we need to go from this level to that level, and that starts to bound the solution space for us, okay? So notice that we've narrowed the list down to just 5 customer benefits out of bunches of them. the 12 that were in the Kano diagram specifically. Also notice that the supplier count includes the customer themselves, our client's customer, because they might throw their hands up with the client and all the competitors and just say, look, we're just going to do it ourselves. Many bigger companies have that capability, you know. They choose not to outsource it, but bring it in-house. We know about that trade-off as project managers. And the chart then helps us make informed choices. Do we shore up something compared to what the customer has? Do we take a leadership position? And so forth. And then our final work product looks something like this. So yes, this is just about the end slide here. So finally, to keep the entire team and all the stakeholders focused, crystal clear focused on the value proposition throughout the project execution at every step of the way, we build out and summarize the initiative using this business model canvas. Very handy. A lot of you probably seen this. And why do we use it? It's because it helps us to get to lead, helps us to lead the client to maintain, to get to and maintain clarity, to gain insights about what the customers that our client serves, what do they need? What are the value propositions? How are they being offered, through exactly what channels? How are we going to make our net new revenue money? It's all here on one business model. We're going to call it a canvas. So between the last slide and this slide, those are two of the most important deliverables that begin being developed in steps 2 and 3 and get revisited as we start to continue to learn through minimum viable offerings, finding out, well, some of what we thought went in here is not as true as we thought it would be. And so we keep it up to date as we learn. So just recapping our 8-step process, it's going to be in the deck that we send you. And the key takeaways I'm hopeful that you found was that by following a systematic process of some kind, hopefully you think that this one, it might be worth some further consideration. But by systematic, you start and do a lot for yourself to be successful by clarifying the fuzzy front end. You identify new opportunities in the marketplace, you develop new products and services. And along the way, all the way through the strategy on a page and the business model canvas, you're making sure that you're grounding the internal viewpoints, what we call voice of the business, with the realities of the voice of the customer. You're keeping it real based on what's actually going on in the marketplace. And that we identify both explicit articulated needs as well as the latent customer needs. And that helps when we're taking this intimate study of the customer's and work environment and seeing things they're not telling us about, but asking them a question. Say, how'd that go? I saw that seemed to be pretty difficult for you. Oh, yeah, that's not the worst of it. You should see me on a busy day, right? They tell you things like this, and all of a sudden, like, what's going on there? It reveals an opportunity to add more and new value that the customer hasn't known to be explicit with. And this says that when we are systematic, then we have a step-by-step process framed in a project management kind of discipline that ensures success. So I'm hopeful that you'll reach out to me, send me an email, connect with me on LinkedIn, say hello to Brendan. I'm hopeful that he's where he needed to be at the end of business day today. And as he wasn't able to join us. If you have any other questions, I have some time. Tanya?
Okay, I thought it was great. It was a wealth of information. I thought the slide deck was very detailed, very informative. You gave a lot of really, really, really great examples. So it will be something to kind of reread afterwards too and go through more thoroughly. So, but I think you did a great job on that. And I'd just like to open up the floor, you know, for anybody that may have any questions, whether you want to take yourself off of mute and ask directly, or if you want to put them in the chat. I always tell everybody, don't be shy.
Well, we had great participation with the chat stream, and I know the hour is getting late, and we had some really good participation. So I thank you.
It looks like Andrea's got a question.
Yeah, Andrea, what is it?
Hi, yes, good afternoon, Scott. Andrea joining from the Bahamas. So glad to be here. I think I'm representing both myself and Lee Lambert, who is normally at these meetups, but he's in Brazil right now. And I just wanted to congratulate you on a great session and to let you know that I will definitely look forward to these slide decks so I could dissect them on a slower pace, because you were presenting so much great information and it was hard to digest some of it because it was just keep going and going and going. But I look forward to taking my time and going over the slides and really getting a better understanding of the information you presented, because it's so informative and vital and critical to our industry. And if I have any questions, I know that I could reach out to you on LinkedIn. So thank you so much for a job well done.
Oh, you're very kind to say so. And by the way, I'm happy to travel either the Baton Rouge or the Bahamas. Just let me know when and where.
And it looks like, and I'll address this question. Eldon had a question on where we can find the meeting minutes. So on meeting minutes, we're recording this meeting on Zoom. Scott will send me the slide deck afterwards. I will communicate that information with my team and with Sally that helps with our website as well. So within a couple of days, we'll have both the slide deck posted as well as the Zoom meeting itself, and that'll be directly on the website. And it looks like Elizabeth had a question for you, Scott. It was, what are some of the methods and tools that you use to hold stakeholder engagement?
Oh, that's a very good question. And there are many answers based on the diversity of stakeholders, isn't it? So let's start with your internal voice of the business stakeholders. They're always going to be looking for short-term results. By that, I mean money. They're looking for, when do we stop spending money and we cross over to the net because we're getting money, right? So we're very cognizant about keeping them abreast of the progress, understanding what the value and credibility of the progress is, and in a way that helps to reveal to them that the net new revenue and margins are near at hand. So sometimes that means special briefings for them so that they can ask questions that they might not want to ask in a larger audience setting. So there's a lot of one-on-ones and small executive group sessions that we have to plan for. And you probably remember that exercise you've done, if you earned your PMP, is like, to what extent are people influential and to what extent are they important to decision-making, and to what extent are they interested? And so you do that 2x2 matrix and you kind of sort out those people and other people that just want to stay informed. And with the Agile approach is one technique we found very helpful with that. Because every 2 weeks, this team, the $1 billion company initiative that was so successful, every 2 weeks we had progress for them. And I coached those executives to be able to walk into a war room that any one of the Agile teams had, and they could examine the Kanban boards and the sprint boards and so forth. And they could begin reading them like a radiologist reads an MRI and see just where the teams were so that they could figure out how they could better support the teams in execution. There's only one way to earn the trust of those people, and that's by delivering business results, favorable business results, and sooner rather than later. You know, the customers are easier to engage. When we show up with a customer, wherever they happen to be, it's not all that unusual for them to say, and we need you to go back and tell your client, our supplier, thank you for sending you and asking these questions and taking the time to care about us. So that word empathy, I don't throw around capriciously. It's about caring about each and every individual in that customer organization of our client. And they'll definitely warm up to that right away. And by the way, my wife's from Birmingham, Alabama, and a little Southern hospitality is not lost on most customers, whether they're north or south of the Mason-Dixon line. And that's all I have to say about that.
That was a great answer. So I wanted to check. I don't know if I saw any other questions coming through, but we do still have a few minutes for questions. Did anybody else have any additional questions for Scott?
Yeah, good questions all. Very thoughtful.
Well, while we're waiting on that, I'll just kind of start wrapping things up a little bit. So I wanted to, I know I put this in the chat, but the PDUs will be dispersed on behalf of current and active members of PMI Baton Rouge who have the credentials. And on that, just allow 3 to 5 business days on it. And we've usually have a lot of different guests who've got their credentials but aren't current members of the chapter. So for that, we don't have the separate identifier to submit it on their behalf. So I'll go ahead and I'll repeat the claim code. It's C106OVYGX7. So, oh, and this is is this the PDF for your?
Yeah, that's if
present-
somebody like to test that. It's a very large PDF file because of all the graphics. So if somebody wanted to
Okay.
test it, just to make sure nothing got corrupted when I did the paste.
I just pulled it down and it looks like, I don't know if I have to log in.
You shouldn't have to log in. There'll be a box in the upper right-hand area of the screen
Okay.
that'll give you an option to
see.
download the PDF.
Okay.
Yep.
That'll work. And so that link does work for those of you on the line right now. And Sally, I'll go ahead. I saved a copy of it and I'll email it to you afterwards as well. And so,
Good. I see Jason has downloaded it. Thanks, Jason.
right. Let me see.
Yep.
Let me copy this to just the download form and I'm going to email that to myself just in case it has anything I need to retread on. Let's see. All right. So, well, this has been great. I appreciate you reaching out to us and I appreciate you taking the time to do this. You know, do you have any other PMI meetings coming up soon or speaking engagements?
Oh, you know, I have to look at my spreadsheet to see where we're going. I know Chattanooga is coming up next, and
Okay.
oh, I'm going to be on an executive panel for PMI Michiana. I've done a lot of programs for them.
Okay.
And they're putting together executive panel, of which I'm one of the members, to talk about how executives handle change management. That's
Okay.
PMI Michiana, PMI Chattanooga. That's the only ones that are coming to mind just now.
Okay. And you know, PMI is having, and this is for everybody on the call too, they're actually having a big global conference in Las Vegas it's the week after Thanksgiving. So like
Right.
November 30th through the 3rd. Now that's something that people have to, pay the event cost and the registration and things of that nature. But I do know they've got an early bird special on their PMI org site for people that register before September 28th. So.
Yeah.
I-
If anybody's interested in where else I'm speaking or some of my colleagues are speaking in my firm, Group Atlantic Incorporated, visit our website, groupatlantic.com. There's an upcoming events tab, and that'll tell you what the latest is on upcoming speaking engagements. Most of them have, some of them have, dinners, fees and that sort of thing, and some of them are free.
Right. We do the same thing, like virtual. We've been doing free this year for both guests and members, and entertaining some change in 2023, but we'll see what happens when 2023 gets here. But for the dinners, we do some of the charges as well when there's that the food component and cost of the restaurant involved. So.
Yeah.
Right. Well, I wanted to say thank you again, for joining us, and then just remind, our participants, we do have the 25-year anniversary coming up this Thursday. And then our next meeting is going to be the virtual one, which will be on October 11th. And just check out the website too, because we've got about 4 or 5 other opportunities in October that are coming up to keep us all connected and get PDUs. So.
Well, what a pleasure it has been spending some time with the PMI Baton Rouge and Lafayette chapter. Loved it, how participative you were, and thank you for your kindness. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much. I appreciate your time.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
So much, everyone. Thanks, Scott. Have a great one.
You're welcome.
Bye.